1974 was a depressing news year in the United States. President Richard Nixon was embroiled in the Watergate scandal, which would eventually force him to resign in November, the first U.S. president to do so. The United States economy was in a deep recession, the result of double-digit inflation and the ongoing energy crisis. Patricia Hearst, the granddaughter of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst, was kidnapped in February and by April had claimed that she had joined her captor's cause, leading to nightly news stories. And on June 4th, in the event that perhaps best defined the trying times of the day, beer was too cheap in Cleveland, Ohio. It is history that deserves to be remembered. It was Tuesday, June 4th, and the Texas Rangers were playing a night game at Cleveland Stadium, the first of a three-game series. Coming off of two consecutive 100-loss seasons, Texas was 25-25, 4 games back from the American League West leading Oakland Athletics. The Cleveland Indians were 24-25, 2.5 games back from the AL East leading Boston Red Sox. Fritz Peterson, a southpaw who had been traded to the Indians by the Yankees in April, was slated to start for the Indians. He was 3-3 on the season. Cleveland Municipal Stadium, the first sports venue in the United States built entirely with public financing, opened in 1931. It was one of the first multi-purpose stadiums and had been home to the Cleveland Indians since its opening, and to the Cleveland Browns, originally with the All-American Football Conference and then with the National Football League, since 1946. When configured for baseball, the stadium seated 74,400 fans, making it the largest in professional baseball in 1974. But Cleveland was a struggling city. Noted for its river pollution, the Cuyahoga River through the city was famous for literally catching fire. One such fire in 1969 had caught the attention of the nation via Time magazine, prompting the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. The Cleveland area had been a flashpoint for anti-Vietnam War sentiment after shootings by the National Guard at nearby Kent State University in 1970. The city was in financial difficulty. Crime was on the rise. In 1962, there had been 59 murders in Cleveland. In 1972, there were 333. The city had a difficult reputation, and people were leaving in droves. The city lost roughly 177,000 inhabitants between 1970 and 1980. And the Cleveland Indians simply weren't very good. They'd finished at the bottom of the American League East in 1973 and weren't doing much better in 1974. Commentator Paul Jackson of ESPN said of them, "The 74 Indians were a smorgasbord of mediocre and forgettable talent, playing in an open-air mausoleum." It had become difficult to fill the massive 74,400-seat stadium. On May 13th, a mere 4,234 had showed up on a chilly night for a game against Boston. On average, 85% of the stadium's tickets went unsold. But the game against Texas on the muggy night, June 4th, attracted a respectable 25,134 crowd, twice what was expected. The reason? Cheap beer. The club was running a promotion, 12 fluid-ounce cups of Stroh's 3.2% beer for just 10 cents each. There was a limit of 6 beers per purchase, but no limit on the number of purchases made during the game. The promotion wasn't new. Several teams in the league, including Texas, had done the promotion. Cleveland had done its first such promotion in 1971, when the beer was only 5 cents. It was an effective promotion for the stadium, so much so that the vendors had trouble serving everyone. Bud Tucker, a columnist for the Independent Press Telegram of Long Beach, California, quipped, "As a Frenchman is inspired by fine wine, or a Russian by classic vodka, so does a Clevelander react to 10-cent beer." The late Tim Russert, known for being the longtime moderator of the show Meet the Press, was 24 at the time and attended the game. In a statement that perhaps defined much of the crowd that night, he said, "I had $2 in my pocket. You do the math." Perhaps there was more going on that night than cheap beer. It was particularly hot and muggy. The June date caught the college-age crowd just as they were coming home for summer, and as Anthony Castrovence of MLB.com noted in 2014, it was a full moon that night. In fact, witnesses note that much of the crowd seemed to have not waited for the cheap beer, and many seemed to have arrived already drunk or high. And for some reason, they also showed up with their pockets stuffed with firecrackers. The crowd started throwing them before the game even started, and they continued throughout. The rowdiness may have had something to do with the team's last meeting a week earlier, on May 29th in Arlington, which had had a bench-emptying brawl during the 8th inning of what would be a Rangers 3-0 victory. Rangers fans had thrown beer and food at the Indians team as they were returning to the dugout. The Indians were furious. Catcher Dave Duncan had to be restrained to keep him from going into the stands to brawl with the crowd. Indians second baseman Jay Brohammer, who had been at the bottom of the pile, promised revenge. Rangers manager Billy Martin added to the fuel. After the game, a Cleveland reporter asked him if he was afraid of fans retaliating in Cleveland. He responded, "Nah, they don't have enough fans to worry about." Cleveland media kept the city riled over the course of the next week. On the morning of the 4th, several newspapers ran a story recalling the May 29 fight and noting, hopefully, the battling will be strictly in the form of baseball. The Newark Advocate of Newark, Ohio ran the story under the headline, "Rangers and Indians to resume base brawling." Brohammer was quoted as saying that he had cooled down and wasn't looking for a fight. Instead, he hoped to get revenge by winning all 3 games of the upcoming series. Indians manager Ken Espermonte doubted that there would be any trouble, saying that when these things happen, they're spontaneous and not planned. The Cleveland fans, on the other hand, might have been making plans of their own. Texas quickly took the lead in the 2nd inning after a home run by outfielder Tom Grieve. But a buzz was in the air, or rather, in the crowd. At the end of the 2nd inning, a woman hopped the fence, ran over to the Indians' on-deck circle, ripped off her shirt, baring her breast to the raucous approval of the crowd, and then tried to kiss the umpire. Amazingly, it wasn't the weirdest thing that would happen that night, nor the only act of exhibitionism. The fun was not all good-natured. Not only was the crowd throwing firecrackers and keeping the grounds crew busy throwing garbage onto the field, but when Rangers pitcher Fergie Jenkins got hit in the stomach with a line drive, the crowd started chanting, "Hit him again!" Meanwhile, the beer kept flowing. Unable to keep up, the vendors reportedly gave up trying to check IDs and started filling up whatever container was handed to them. 19-year-old fan Terry Yurkic recalled, "I had a big Dog and Suds mug, maybe 32 ounces. Looked like a mini keg." Another witness said that as the crowd, which he described as notably younger and longer-haired than usual, grew progressively more drunk, there was some antics every half inning or so. Young fans ran onto the field and dodged security. When Grieve hit a 2nd home run in the 4th, extending the Rangers' lead to 5-1, a naked man ran onto the field and slid into second base. In the 5th inning, a father-son team jumped onto the field and booed the crowd. Another streaker ran across the field carrying his clothes with him, but still wearing his left sock. As he approached the fence, he threw his clothes over, planning his escape. The crowd could see what he could not. A Cleveland police officer was on the other side of the fence, catching both the clothes and the offender. The game had to be halted in the 6th, as the crowd was throwing firecrackers into the bullpen. Umpire Nestor Shylock cleared the bullpen, but was trying to let play continue. Fans were no longer just throwing beer and firecrackers, but also rocks, batteries, and any part of the stadium that wasn't bolted down. A group of fans started trying to tug the padding off the left field wall, drawing the grounds crew away from picking up the growing pile of trash that was landing on the field. Despite the antics, the game continued, and Cleveland managed to tie the game at 5-all in the bottom of the 9th, with 2 out and the winning run on second. But then 19-year-old Terry Yurkic, the fan with the Dogs and Suds mug, decided that he wanted a souvenir. It was not a good decision. He jumped the fence, ran up behind Texas outfielder Jeff Burroughs, and grabbed his hat. There's some controversy regarding what happened next. According to Yurkic, Burroughs kicked him. But because of the slope of the diamond from the Rangers' dugout, all Billy Martin could see was Burroughs' legs, and it looked like he'd been knocked down. More fans were climbing onto the field, and Martin thought, Jeff was out there all by himself. I saw knives and other things. We just couldn't let our teammate get beat up. He ordered his team onto the field, carrying bats to protect Burroughs. It was not a good decision. Seeing the Rangers leave the dugout sparked the already riled and inebriated mob. Fans stormed the field, greatly outnumbering the players. Martin recalled, "Now I know how the people of the Alamo felt." The crowd was carrying knives, chains, clubs made from stadium seats. Stadium security was overwhelmed, although it's hard to see what they could have done in any case, and no one had considered asking for a greater police presence. Seeing the melee and Rangers players being injured, Espermonte ordered the Indians onto the field. The 2 teams who had been fighting each other so recently made common cause against the mob. Outnumbered, they fought their way back to the dugouts and retreated into the locker rooms behind locked doors. Shylock, bleeding from a cut on his head from a thrown bottle, called the game as soon as the players made it inside. He said he didn't do it earlier for fear it would spark retaliation against the players. The game was called a forfeit, going into the record books as a 9-0 loss for the Indians. Fans kept rioting, stealing everything they could take, including, literally, stealing the stadium's bases. So really, the organist played Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Director of Stadium Operations Dan Zerbe ordered the lights shut off, and the Cleveland police arrived and restored order. Despite the apparent violence, there were no serious injuries and less than a dozen arrests. Area hospitals reported 7 people treated and released. Martin was quoted saying, "That's the closest you'll ever see to a guy getting killed in baseball." Zerbe opined, "There is no doubt in my mind what caused the problem. It was the beer." Shylock called the crowd uncontrollable beasts. Indians Vice President Alva Bonda said, "In the end, there was no way that even 1,000 policemen could have controlled the few that were determined to act up," but nonetheless blamed Shylock and the crew for failing to control the game and protested the forfeit. Newspapers had a field day. The Windsor Star headline read, "Soust Tribe Fans Force Forfeit." Some responded with humor, but others took the riot seriously and called for an end to beer sales at baseball games. Despite the calls to change the sport and stop selling beer at Major League Baseball games, nothing really changed. The American League issued a memorandum instructing all teams to let them know in advance if they're going to have any promotional events. And the Indians decided that the next time they had a 10-cent beer night that they would limit patrons to 4 beers per night, no exceptions. Actually, in the end, it appeared that this is one of those spontaneous events. The Indians and the Rangers played the next 2 nights. They split the wins, and there were no incidents. And the Indians held another 10-cent beer night in July, and that went without incident, or at least without a riot. The Rangers finished the season 84-76, second in the American League West behind the A's, who won the series that year. They were the first, and so far only, team in Major League Baseball history to finish over 500 after 2 consecutive 100-loss seasons. Burroughs was the American League MVP, Hargrove the Rookie of the Year, and the Associated Press named Billy Martin the American League Manager of the Year. The Cleveland Indians finished 77-85, a lackluster 4th in the American League East. 10-cent beer night perhaps summed up, well, a dismal decade for Cleveland and their baseball team. The prospects for both would eventually improve, but not really until the 1990s. Terry Yerkick, the fan whose desire for a souvenir apparently sparked the riot, perhaps summed up the attitude of Clevelanders to both their city and their baseball team at the time. He said, "It never occurred to us that they would forfeit. We were disappointed, yes, but the Indians weren't very good then. It's not like it cost them a pennant or anything." I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy, short snippets of forgotten history between 10 and 15 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, please go ahead and click that thumbs up button. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please write those in the comment section. I will be happy to personally respond. Be sure to follow The History Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and check out our merchandise on teespring.com. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you need to do is subscribe.